DC Capstone Report joins us every single Tuesday, and he brings some great insight from a different perspective. He's not one of these guys that's out here doing it to try to just drum up some clicks, but actually bring you content that you can chew on and gnaw on a little bit. DC was down under the weather last week, but glad he's feeling better. DC Capstone Report. Remember that podcast that is put up each and every week. You can find it at dccapstonereport.com. And DC Capstone Report is sponsored by RollTideBama.com as well as FreelancePictures.com. DC, welcome into the Blitz. Glad you're doing better, my friend.
Oh, glad I'm feeling better as well, Martin. Good morning.
Good morning. Hey, let's just go ahead get a quick review. I know we hadn't had a chance to talk to you about last week's game. I know it probably seemed even worse to you, or it may have been better because you were kind of down under the weather. But what's your overall assessment of Alabama's surprisingly lopsided loss to the Clemson Tigers?
Well, it was very surprising. I didn't see it coming. Of course, I always make my predictions based on the caveat that everything's going to go. There'll be no mistakes, and there'll be no penalties, and everything will be just an even kill game. And that didn't start that way. I think we got off on the wrong foot with turnovers. I think the two interceptions, the failure to be able to complete drives in the red zone, just was making mistakes penalty-wise. I just think all that was a perfect storm for Alabama to be unable to compete in the game. Had we not thrown those interceptions, were we able to convert all the red zone attempts into touchdowns, would have been a different game. But to give Clemson credit, that there was a reason for some of that. They had a great scheme for us. They had a great game plan for us. It came out later that they'd been working on Alabama the 90% of the time while they were off. I spent very little time on Notre Dame. That was a gamble on their part, but I think we all agreed that Notre Dame was the weakest link in the playoff, and they took that chance, and it really worked out well for them. So I thought overall Alabama played probably one of its worst games of the season, probably one of the worst coaching games of the season, being able to adapt during the game. All those things kind of just culminated into a beatdown by Clemson. So that's kind of my overall picture. It wasn't what I expected at all.
Well, since that game, Alabama has had several changes from the coaching staff to the players. And my question or my show yesterday was who's in, who's out. When you look back at that game, the guys who've made that decision to leave versus those who have made the decision to stay, which one of those guys do you think Alabama misses the most out of the Quentin Williams, Jonah Williams, Josh Jacobs, Irv Smith, Mac Wilson, Deontay Thompson, Savion Smith? And I'm telling you, for some reason, I've been like, okay, is Raekwon really going to stay? The deadline is today, I think. So is he really going to stay?
Yeah, I mean, overall, all those people, I guess of the ones I did expected, Quentin Williams were going to miss him the most. He affects the game the most from anybody. I mean, even in that Clemson game, he affected that game. He had some great plays. But I expected him to go. Of the ones I didn't expect to go, I think Mac Wilson and Deontay Thompson will be the ones that we'll miss the most on our defensive side of the ball. Of course, we're going to miss Josh Jacobs. I would love to see him stay, but I think he's primed and ready to go to the NFL. So the ones that I thought that maybe could have used another year, I think Mac Wilson and Deontay Thompson will be missed the most. Now, of the coaches, no one's talking about him. Everybody's talking about Dan Enos and Mike Loxley, but there's no doubt in my mind that the coach that we'll miss the most is Josh Gaddis. I think he's a great offensive mind. I think he's going to make a great offensive coordinator. But what he brought to our wideouts this past year, and I know I harped on it all year, foot placement, hand placement, and getting off the line. That's the reason our guys are wide open a lot of times on those slants. And so I think we're going to miss Josh Gaddis a lot.
Yeah, and I would agree with you there that Josh Gaddis may be one of the guys that because Loxley, we knew it was coming, and then Enos was a surprise, and Key just it was obvious that that's probably a mutual decision because it was a lateral move. But Gaddis kind of just slipped out of here to Michigan, and we really hadn't talked about the potential impact that can have on a team. And to me, one of the things that I saw on top of everything else that you talked about with Gaddis, what's the prima donna position? If they don't get their way, they start to gripe, they start to complain, they become, they can quickly become a cancer. And when you have four guys that as legit as all of those guys could be number one receivers for any program. And it appeared from the outside looking in that he managed that as well as he did developing them on the field. So that's going to be the new guy's challenge as well.
I agree, definitely. I think when you spread the ball around to that many people and get everybody happy and on board, you got a freshman that's nipping at their heels, and you get him in the mix and a tight end that can really catch the ball, running back that catch the ball out of the backfield. I mean, that's to my, one of the greatest things he did was keep that unit as a cohesive unit working together and cause them to be better together than they could have been individually. So, I think we'll really miss Josh Gaddis.
We're going to continue our conversation with DC Capstone Report presented by freelancepictures.com, rolltopbama.com. DC, when we come back, you mentioned that we may miss Mac Wilson. I want to talk a little bit about that defensive side of the ball and whether our young coordinators were potentially in over their head. I'm not one that's going to jump ship and say it was all about them on the other night, but I'm going to talk about what I saw throughout the season from those two in terms of player development. And that's what I want to talk with you about when we come back on the other side. DC, we're with DC Capstone Report. Find them at dccapstonereport.com. That podcast will be up, and you can find it each and every week right there. DC, as we were going to break, we were talking about, you had mentioned Mac Wilson kind of was a surprise, and it'll hurt. Now, the question I have, because it's interesting, there's a conversation going on Facebook Live right now about how Clemson and Dabo appears to create depth. Now, I would say traditionally Alabama has. But this year, two of our thinnest areas, to me, we didn't get any players ready. And Mac Wilson at inside linebacker leaving is one of those areas where, I mean, in the past, we've always had a young stud that we knew was going to step in, whether it was him, whether it was Moses, whether it was Shondell Hamilton. You can go back, whether it was Hightower after, McLean. It's always been that next guy. And I don't know that we saw that on the field. We're guessing now. And so, DC, when you look at that, is that why it hurt so much? Is because of Mac Wilson leaving or because of the fact that we didn't prepare for Mac Wilson's departure?
Well, I think it's a combination of both. I think Mac Wilson brings a lot to the field, a lot of experience. And I think him and Dylan Moses play really well together when they're asked to do what they're going to do and what they're supposed to do. I believe a part of the Clemson game that most people aren't talking about was asking our middle linebackers to do things they weren't normally required to do. Because of Christian Miller's injury in that game, you saw Dylan Moses out of position, looked like he was lost a couple of plays, didn't know what he was trying to do, and that was because they were trying to get him to do too much of what he wasn't used to doing. I don't think they've been cross-trained like that. I don't think they have somebody behind them that can come in and just actually do that. So That's why losing Mac Wilson is going to be a big thing. Behind him, you got Jalen Moody, who was his backup during this season, but he didn't play enough to even know how to run the offense. Behind him, you got Ale Ko, the freshman that played on special teams, but he is not. He's not sure. We don't know what we got in there. He may be great. We don't know, and we have probably some people that have been redshirted, but they weren't ready to play last year, so they're still going to be a year behind. So that's why I say losing Mac Wilson is probably the biggest impact on defense. And you got to remember, you mentioned earlier about defensive coaches. You got to remember, coming in this season, we all said our defense lost so many players. It was going to be hard to replace. It was going to be the most difficult. And then not to mention that, but you got new coordinator and you got 3 new defensive coaches who are trying to work together for the first time. So I always thought our defense overperformed instead of underperformed this year. And I think we got exposed a little bit in some of the closer games, and that also hurt us. The other thing that hurt us is the type of offense that we ran. That hurt our defense. That's not an Alabama normal Nick Saban scheme that complements defense. We were trying to have our defense complement the offense. It was really a difference maker this season on how our defense performed.
Yeah, and hold on to that thought for a second, because I want to go back to Mack Wilson. I believe you've been higher on Mack Wilson than anybody that I've seen. And so if you were critiquing him, to me, there's one area, well, there's a couple areas that are strengths, but they also can be exploited. One is he's aggressive on the play action, so he gets sucked up and you can run behind him. But the thing that to me, we hadn't talked a lot about this. It was a game changer in that game when they threw that little pass out in the flat, and it should have been a loss at best, a 1 or 2 yard gain, and he's so aggressive. He just overruns the play. The running back cuts back and runs for about 40, 50 yards, whatever it was. What would you coach Mack Wilson up on? Because like I said, he's been a guy that I think, just from your comments on the Blitz, you've been higher on than most people have as a middle linebacker.
Well, I have. I mean, I don't have a doubt that I've been higher. A lot of people are kind of down on Mack Wilson, but I think he has all the skill sets to play at the next level. The 2 you just mentioned are his weaker points. I do think to me, he's kind of like a Mark Barron. He can cover in pass protection. He can cover and run stop. But his aggression does take him out of the play, allows his aggression to take him out of the play. So I think what he's got to work on at the next level is going to have to work on his eyes, his coordination, is being able to keep on the ball and not over pursue. He did a lot better job, I think, of that this year than he did in the year past. But I think being able to stay in his lane, play his assignment football, if he does that at the next level, I think he'll make a difference. Now, do I think he's the top first round, second round pick? Some of these mock draft show. No, I don't think so. I think maybe late second round, early third round. But I do think he can play at the next level.
Speaking with DC Capstone Report. DC, let's stick on the defense side of the ball just for a second, because I don't know what Nick Saban is going to do in terms of his coaching staff and his turnover, et cetera. But it appears to me this year he went for recruiting versus on-the-field expertise and experience. And the thing that I look at when I was trying to go through my grades, and I hadn't finished that yet, but I look at the 2 positions that to me didn't do a good job of. Not only did they didn't do a great job necessarily, and some of that was injuries and some of that was limitation, but in terms of number of players, losing Chris Allen, losing Terrell Lewis hurts you as an outside linebacker coach. I mean, let's be real. And then losing Christian Miller down the stretch. But those 2 positions, the defense coordinator and the co-defense coordinator, to me, absolutely failed this team in terms of getting players experience and developing players. What's your assessment in that specific area in their ability to get guys in spot situations when the game was on the line?
I think that goes without saying. I think it's probably this year we didn't develop players in the behind our starters. We didn't focus on them as much and get as much out of our starters as we could in those positions. I think it goes without saying. I think during the season there was some frustration with some of the younger talent behind there of not getting the playing time. I think you saw that boil over between the bowl games. So, I think there's opportunities there that we could have done a really better job of bringing along some of our young players to play on in those positions help. Now, lose a Terrell Lewis, lose a Chris Allen, lose Christian Miller right before the championship game. Now, those are things you really can't. It hurts your coaching. But if you develop a player like Yabi Anoma to come along all year long, then that I think that would have been a better situation for us than trying to take one of our middle linebackers who's starting and moving him in that position and confusing him. So, I think it was a poor coaching job in that situation.
Yeah, and I think you just nailed it. Is by the 15th game of the season, Yaba Noma, and this is my point to Pat. Yaba Noma was a 5-star stud from last year, and in the 15th game of the season, they didn't have enough confidence in him to put him out there on the edge. And I always try to remind people, if you play, by the time these guys play their 15th game, that is the equivalent of first of all, they come in early, so they have all spring, and they go to a spring training. Then they play 15 games. That was the equivalent, David, of me having been a red shirt freshman playing into my third game. So these guys have gone through a spring and played 15 games, and it would take me over 2 years of being on campus to get that much. So that's why I say don't put too much hope in these young guys. They may be some studs, but it takes a lot more than just being a stud in high school to play championship winning football. Let's make sure that the target we're looking at, DC, is the right one. We're not talking about Alabama winning 11, 12 games. That's going to happen. We're talking about Alabama being able, when they get to this game, to the championship, that they can get it done. And go ahead.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, you can't expect a 5-star freshman who has got all the athleticism in the world to come in on his first day and be able to play championship level football. They just don't have the eye discipline. They don't have the footwork, the hand placement. They don't have the strength. But after 15 games, if you've developed them correctly, it's one thing to be a great recruiter, but it's another thing to develop that 5-star. There are some 5-star players that have been bust because they have either themselves didn't allow themselves to be coached, weren't coachable, or they didn't have the coach to coach them. And they're all over the United States. Alabama has never been that team. Alabama has been a team that brought the player in, especially on defense. You can come in on offense with great skill level and participate and play and show that skill. On defense, in the scheme that Alabama likes to run, the Nick Saban scheme, it is hard. You've heard these players like Dylan Moses and say, "I was lost my first year."
Yeah,
you're lost in the terminology. You're lost in what your responsibilities are. So I don't care what 5-star you got coming in on defense. He is going to be able to make an impact as a freshman. But hey, that's going to be developed over that series. If we don't have coaches that can do that, if we're not concentrating on bringing them along, then we're going to have 5-star freshmen players, but they're not going to be playing at championship level. And that is the goal of the University of Alabama to win a national championship. And
that is where we want to go when we come back. DC, what do you think Nick Saban does? Of course, it's only your opinion. You may have some inside scoop as you seem to be able to get, but where's Nick Saban going on his defensive staff? Where is he going on his offensive staff? We'll talk about that and more right here on the Blitz on Tide 102.9 and 100.9. All right, we got DC Capstone Report in with us. And as we were going to break there, we were talking about what we wanted to talk about in terms of the coaching staff and which direction Nick Saban's going. Hey, there's Chuck Long, there's Sarkisian, and that's about the only two that I'm hearing right now. Someone mentioned Nussmeier yesterday, but what are you hearing, DC, in terms of where Nick Saban will go, first of all, with the OC position?
Well, I heard everybody speculating Sarkisian coming in as offensive coordinator. I'm not confident that that's what he's even being interviewed for. I kind of go on a different. I could be wrong, but I'm kind of going on a different route on this. I think he may be coming in as a quarterback's coach, and looking at that situation. I just have an idea that Coach Saban is. I don't feel like he was comfortable coaching this year with the RPO offense that we were running. I don't think he ever had a grasp of the defense in that, and I don't think it complemented his defense. In my mind, I think it was the most foreign thing to him to have to coach. Now, I believe that he felt like that was the situation where he needed to go with the talent that he had, but it still didn't produce the national championship as he thought. I think Coach Saban, this is going to be his most difficult year of coaching at Alabama. And I know some people are going to say, well, that's crazy, but because of all the recruiting he's got coming in. But I think it's going to be the most difficult year, the most challenging year. But it could be the best. This coming up year could be his best coaching year ever if the moves I'm thinking that he can make, he makes and makes changes. I think that he did see that Dan Enos having a quarterback coach brought a great quality to the quarterback, and I think they're going to need that going forward. So I could be fooled. I think Sarkisian could come in and be an offensive coordinator. He's done that on different levels, and I think he could. But I think he'd also bring in both of those names you mentioned. I'm hearing Chip Long from Notre Dame, but I mean he could bring in both of those coaches and still have the type of offense that he wants to run to Alabama. And Martin, I know everybody loves the passing and the RPOs, but that does not bode. RPO does not bode well for running the football the way Alabama runs football. And we saw that in the red zone. We couldn't put it in from the 5-yard line, from the 2-yard line to 1-yard line. And our offensive line, when you're blocking for RPOs, you're not practicing the block, knock people off the ball, and that's what Alabama has always done in the past. So I look for Alabama to get back to something more like that this coming year. Could be way off wrong, in my opinion, nobody else's, and it could be way off base. But I watched a little bit of the New Orleans Saints this past week when they played, and I said, hey, that is the style of offense and defense that Coach Saban used to coach at Alabama. Their offense took the ball on 11-minute, 9-second drive.
18 plays.
Yeah, running the ball and passing the ball off of those play-action passes, getting great yardage for passing the ball, getting some tough yards running the ball, and then all of a sudden breaking into a big run like we've done in the past. That's the type. And then you know what that did? That rested their defense for 11 minutes and 9 seconds. And when that defense came back out there and had to make a stop, they made the stop because they were well rested, and so their offense complemented their defense. That's the type of way Alabama's always played. That's not the way they played this year. Our offense bailed out our defense instead of the other way around. So I look for Alabama to get back to running the ball, and I think they're going to have to make some changes on the offensive staff. I think bringing in Sarkisian is good. I think he'll be a great quarterbacks coach or co-offensive coordinator. Chip Long. I think Butch Jones probably gets elevated to an on-field position. He's already there. I think Coach Saban's had a tendency to do that in the past. I'm not sure that we've seen the last of the coaching changes at Alabama on defense. I'm not sure how that's going to go in the offseason. There could be a potential change there coming. So I think this is probably going to be one of the most difficult coaching seasons for Coach Saban. But you know what? He coaches much better coming off a loss than he does coming off a victory.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward. To me, I don't think it's going to be a down year for Alabama. I think it's going to be a year where it's going to be a struggle, and I think that they really, Coach Saban can really put his mark on the team this year and make a difference.
Well, DC, you said a mouthful and all of that, but a couple things. I think that Sark comes in to potentially co-coordinators. Okay. You see these coaches doing this now, and I don't think it hurts Sarkisian at all for his future to be a co-coordinator at, say, I'm not sure Chuck Long doesn't come in to coach the quarterbacks as well. I mean, those guys being co-coordinators, one having a quarterback and one having the passing game, one having the running game. Because to what your point was, this Alabama offense, think about how few big runs we had this year. And everybody said, hey, when Tua comes in, the running backs are going to love this offense even more. Well, I don't think that's necessarily the case because of the RPO. The offensive line wasn't always blocking. And I'm not dogging the offense because it was very successful up until the last game. But in the last game, what it was weak at, we keep talking about, well, our defense got exposed. Our defense got exposed. So did our offense in that last game. And what our weaknesses were, Clemson forced us into that. DC, we may have to catch up because we lost you last week because we didn't get to everything we wanted to get to. But I want to honor your time and give you the last closing comments in terms of kind of where do you think Nick Saban goes? Everybody's out there, hey, the dynasty's over. You've already said you think this is his toughest coaching year, but I give you the final word here on this Tuesday morning.
Well, I'll say this. Look, as long as Nick Saban is coaching University of Alabama, the dynasty is not over. I mean, I said it before. I'll say it again. He coaches much better coming off a loss than he comes off a win. He's heard it from his own mouth. He says he hates losing more than he loves winning. And as much as he loved that beating Georgia in the national championship game year before last, this past year's loss to Clemson will resonate much more in his soul, and he will come out better. He'll have a challenge, and I think he puts his stamp on this team. And I know we've talked about our defense being bare, but I know from friends of mine that have given me the indication there's some players that we've already got on the team that's been redshirted, that have been developed, that's going to come out, and we're going to see another person step up like a 20-and-week that's going to make a difference this year. And I think Christian Barrymore can do that. I think Jerez Parks can do that. Stephon Wynn. I think we're going to have some big players on defense going to step up. And I believe Coach Saban will put them in the right position to make plays. Go back to a more style that he's comfortable with. And I think we still compete for the national championship this next year. So, no, the dynasty is not over.